Good morning, good afternoon. Today I am going to teach you the poem Good Morrow, written by John Donne. Yesterday in the last class we were discussing about Death Not Proud, written by John Donne. Today we are going to discussing John Donne Good Morrow. John Donne Good Morrow. So Good Morrow, I read the poem. I wonder by my thoughts what thou and I did till we were we not weaned till then, but sucked on country pleasures childishly, or uttered we in seven sleepers' den. It was so, but this all pleasures fancies be. If ever any beauty I did see, which I desired and got, it was but a dream of thee. And now good morrow to our waking souls, which watch not one another out of fear, for love all love of other sides controls, and makes one little room and everywhere. Let sea discoverers to new worlds have gone, let maps to others, words and words have shown. Let us possess our word, each at one and is one. My face in thine eye, thine in mine appears, and true plain arts do in this rest. Where can we find two better hemispheres without sharp north, without declining west? Whatever dice was not mixed equally, if our two loves be one, thou and I, so alike that none slacken, none can die. So Good Morrow is an ecstatic and passionate lyric of love. It celebrates the rapture of mutual love, joy of one who is newly in love and finds that his sweetheart is equally ardent in her love for him. In other words, the poem is about the happiness of loving and being loved. The souls of the lovers and not their bodies have just awakened. They wonder how they live out. A monologue in which a man is speaking directly to a woman. The woman remains silent, or rather, her response is not given, but her presence is felt. Her face in his eye is in hers appears. The poem succeeds in evoking a picture of two flesh and blood human beings who act in relation to each other. It is a poem about we and us, not about I and she. Ellen Gardner rightly observes the poems which Donne wrote on the experience of loving, where love is reciprocated, poems in which thou art and T or I are merged into P and is most original and profound contribution of the poetry of human love. The three stanzas deal with time, present, and future. They also deal with physical love pertaining to the world of flesh, the mind that pursues this, and finally, the spiritual aspect of love. The good morrow is not merely a salutation of new day, but the discovery of something more real and strange than anything they have known so far. It is an absorbing love. We have here a contrast between life before and life after the awakening of love. The discovery of love makes all that has gone before seem unimportant. The awakened lover realizes that all the objects passionately pursued by him were unusual phantoms. This experience is commonly to lovers. Donne has united this familiar experience of love, the lover, with its philosophical counterpart, the Platonic contrast between the illusion of sensuous appearances and the truth of the idea. After the souls have awakened, they become absorbed in one another. Love, not fear, restricts their attention to each other and yet makes their room a world. The poet affirms the point that the love is eternal because if our two loves be one and if they love each other equally, then none can die. So in the poem Good Morrow, the poet greets his wife with a good morning. He wonders where the two were before their marriage. They were born in different places in different families, but the unseen hand of fate brought them together. It's a mystery. However, since both of them are joined by the hand of fate, they will so remain. No force on earth can separate them. They are fused into each other. He sees his reflection in her eyes and vice versa. Though their bodies are die, their soul is immortal. Therefore, the poet wishes a happy, long married life. This poem, too, like the other poems of John Donne, is full of fresh and fanciful ideas. The novelty of expression is indelibly left on the poem. The style of Donne is vigorous and fresh. It is conversational and argument alive. The style of Donne influenced Herbert, Hopkins, Crashaw, and others. Everything that does contains some element of contrariety. If our two lovers are either numerically one or exactly similar in all respects, then neither of them can come to an end. If things are dissimilar and not mixed equally, they get corrupted and they die. The poet arrests that the lovers' loves be one in the loves cannot die, and also suggests the loves of himself and his mistress are entirely similar. And also, whenever two people are brought together in mutual affection, one lives in the other and the other lives other in him. So in this way, they mutually exchange their identities. Each gives himself to the other in such a way that can receive the other returns each as himself and as the other too. A lover dies within himself the moment he forget about himself as well as the person he loved. He loved. So Johnson was Dean of St. Paul's and poet, greatest of the so-called metaphysical poets. He exercised a strange influence on literature for over half century. After his death, and there was a revival of interest in his works after the first work. His political works consist of elegies, satires, epigrams, and religion poems, in which, with some conceits, there is much novelty and imagination of a high order. His life was written by Isaac Watton. His love poems are more important and charming than his religious poems. They are addressed to a certain lady or his wife. In this poem, The Good Morrow, John Donne glorifies the love addressing his lady. The poet says that he wonders what thou and I did till we loved. Sucked on country deserts childishly, the lover declared that if ever any beauty he did see, which he desired and get it was but a dream of her. Greeting the lady with a good morning, the lover says that they have no fear of anything. They are strangely protected by love, strongly protected by love. Love controls everything. It is everywhere. The lover does not bother whatever happens to anyone. He says, let's see discovers to new world have gone, that maps to other words on words have shown. The lovers would like to possess one world, each are one and is one. Their love is so much that their faces are reflected in each other's eye. The lover asked his lady, where can we find two better hemispheres with out sharp north without clenching the west? So the lover daringly declares that love never dies and therefore the lovers are immortal. So though Donne lived in the 16th century, he was totally unconventional. His poetic style is most depressing. There is a good deal. In his poems, even Shakespeare, the Donne's contemporary, did not have the uh, boldness of Donne in going against tradition. His poems are argumentative. He is appreciately called the precursor of modern poetry. He is called as the precursor of modern poetry. So and then the poems, it is celebratively a lyric in capture the love of first sight. The witty elaboration of thought runs like this: our love is unique, all other pleasures are mere fancy, and all previous experience as unreal as a dream. We are each to each a complete world, like two hemispheres, but without change. But without change or decline. Our love cannot change because it is equal on both sides. We notice a suggestion of intimacy and extreme joy in such details as waking, sucking, snoring, and discovering. There is, however, a progress from infant or childish pleasure to adult response. The poem takes an idealistic turn of thought at the end. I take this poem as one of the several poems for which Donne deserves the following praise: the first poet in the world in some things. The poem probes deep into psychology of the lover's experience. In Good Morrow, the fundamental idea is that the world of the lovers is as good as the physical world, and the final reference inference is that it is even better, that it is imperishable. Once the parallelism is made, Donne pursues it to the end, and collecting facts from science and scholastic philosophy justifies its initial point with enriched meaning. The distinctive characteristic of the poem are the intellect and passion and the method of argumentation. The reader says Ellen Gardner, he is held to an idea or a line of argument, and he cannot but move along with it. Like good advocate in a court of law, Dunn's concern is to prove the point, whatever case he has in hand. So to quote F. W. Penn, in this little poem, we have the adult manner of Donne. Practically every element is present. The first line and off gives one of those magical phrases which left his verse out of the common rut. Throughout the piece, we feel the directness of impact, which is outstanding characteristic of his phrasing. In stanza 2 and 3, we find the types of imagery which most distinguished him from his contemporaries. Temperamentally averse to the and artificiality of the love poetry of his time, he attempts realism as has been already seen in the satires. Tired of the worn-out conventions of classical imagery, he turns to the contemporary life in vivid interest. One of the chief preoccupations of his time was geographical discoveries which accordingly are pressed into service. Dunn's imagery has always impressed readers by its range and variety and its avoidance of the conventionally ornamental. Imagery in a poem of Donne is not decorative. Instead, it is developing agency of his thought and feeling. Images are taken from myths, everyday life, the geographical world, and the scholastic philosophy. From the homely activities of infant feeding, we pass to the exotic adventures of sea voyages from the homely and the philosophers. These apparently disparate elements from jostling each other out make a meaningful pattern of movement. We haven't done an amalgamation of often contradictory experiences into a whole. T.S. Eliot says, a thought of done was an experience. It modified his sensibility. When a poet's mind is perfectly equipped for its work, it is constantly amalgamating disparate experience. The ordinary man's experience is chaotic, irregular, fragmentary. The latter falls in love or reads Spinoza, and these two experiences have nothing to do with each other or with the noise of the typewriter or the smell cooking in the mind of the poet. These experiences are always forming new words. This is about the poem Good Borrow written by John Donne. Now we are discussing about S.T. Coleridge, Frost at Midnight. Frost at Midnight. S.T. Coleridge. So S.T. Coleridge, S.T. Coleridge is one of the greatest romantic poets of the 19th century England. Wordsworth, who is also one of the great romantic poets, came into contact with Coleridge, and both of them inaugurated the Romantic school by publishing lyrical ballads in 1798. Other romantic poets are John Keats, Shelley, and Byron. So the greatest achievement by Coleridge is that remarkably focuses on the image of man. He fully explores the super concrete visual pictures in which are combined supernatural elements and the mysterious of the unknown. Coleridge also recognized a great critic and philosopher. His lectures on Shakespeare and other poets are enduring value. His Biographia Literaria is considered a great contribution to literary criticism. I am going to read the poem Frost at Midnight, written by S.T. Coleridge. The frost performed its secret ministry, unhelped by a wind. The owlet's cry came loud and dark, again loud as before. The inmates of my cottage, all at rest, have left me to that of solitude. So you are reading the poem in your prescribed notes. Now I am going to explaining the things in Frost at Midnight. Samuel Taylor Coleridge, poet, critic, philosopher, was born in Devonshire. He was a man of varied interest. The best of his poetic work was done between 1797 to 1803. It consists of Kubla Khan, Christabel, The Rime of the Ancient Mirror, Frost at Midnight, Dejection, and Love, Youth and Age. Coleridge chiefly attempted the ballads, the ode and the lyric, though Coleridge does not worship nature, like Wordsworth does it. So no less, all his great poems are sent right amidst scenes of nature minutely observed and transmuted into the something rich and strange by the power of imagination, vested in German philosophy. Coleridge sometimes interviews his philosophic notions. In his poems, Frost at Midnight makes a pausing reference to the mind's and interpret the object by its own mood. He has at his command the choicest words that the aptest meter to charm the air by his musical effects and mind by the picturesque images. Frost at Midnight was written by Coleridge to celebrate the birth of his son Ertley in 1798. The poem is written in contemplative mood. The poem also has a peculiar autobiographical interest. The poet's thoughts wander back to his own past when he was a student. Not only does he think of his past life, but he also thinks to guess what kind of life his son will lead. He wishes to what his son will develop intimate contact with nature, for it is the greatest to man. The Frostin secretly performing its duty associated by wind. All the inhabitants of the cottage are sleeping, and the poet is left all alone, which is favorable for philosophical thinking. The poet is alone with his child, sleeping beside him in the cradle. The sea, hills, words, and village are extremely silent, and as inaudible as dreams. So their blue flame of fire lying low is absolutely motionless. A thin piece of soot is seen fluttering on the grate, and the poet identifies himself with that. For any, only the great and he are moving. The rest of the world is motionless. He interprets the movement of the suit to portend the arrival of an absent friend. The poet mind now goes back to the past when he was a student as a young boy. Whenever he saw the fluttering firm, he would be excited. He dreamed of his sweet birthplace and the old church tower whose bells rings from morning till evening. As he kept looking at the moving film of suit, he fell asleep. But even in his sleep, he did not. He, he dreamed of the same thing, and the same thoughts come to his mind. Even the next morning, even in the wakeful state, he was seeing his classroom and his strict teacher. Though he was looking at his book, his mind was wandering. Whenever the door opened, he would look in that direction with happy expectation of seeing some friend, his aunt, his sister, and some playmates of his boyhood days. So, addressing his baby, who is sleeping in the cradle by his side, he saw that the child, he says that the child gave breathing, so and in the quiet atmosphere, fills up the gap between his thoughts in his mind. It makes him happy to think that his child will be brought up and educated in an atmosphere that is different from his own. The poet grew up in the city of London, where he was confined to dim cloisters and could not see the beauty of nature except the sky and stars. But his son will brought up amidst nature. He shall see the beautiful sights and hear the lovely sounds of nature. For God instructs man through nature. So, being in constant company of nature, his child will learn to love all the seasons. He will love the season of summer when the earth is clothed with green, and he will love winter too. The red breast sits and sinks between the tufts of snow on the leafless branches of an apple tree covered with moss. He will also admire the rainy season when the sound of rain drops and heard and the drops of rain that learn to that turn to ice in the frost and shine in the forget of the man. Some of the important annotation. The inmates of my cottage, all at rest, have left me to the solitude which suits obscure musings. So these lines taken from the poem Frost at Midnight written by Coleridge. The frost is secretly performing its work without being helped by the wind. It is still and quiet, the only sounds heard and only cry. So all the inmates of the cottage are fast asleep. The poet is left all alone, which most suitable for philosophical thinking. Coleridge was not only a poet and critic and also a philosopher versed in German philosophy. Coleridge sometimes intervenes his philosophic notions into his poems. The poet makes the reference to the mind's tendency to interpret objects according to its mood. Another line, only that film which fluttered and the great still flutter than other, the soul unquiet this, methinks its motion in this busy of nature, push of nature, gives it dim smoothing with who live, making it a comparable from. So this poem, these lines are all taken from the Robert Frost poem Frost at Midnight. The frost is servility performing its work. Everything is still and all the inmates of the college, cottage, all asleep, and the poet is left all alone, which is most favorable for philosophical thinking. Other than the poet, who is awake the only that other moment in the room, in the moment of the truth, in the great, the poet identifies himself with that. He inter- interprets the moment of the suit in the great to portend the arrival of an almost friend. So another important thing to watch that fluttering star strangers and after with unclosed lids already had I formed of my sweet birthplace and old demands tower whose bells the poor man's only music sang from more to evening all art face day. These are all some of the important lines of Frost at midnight. Frost at midnight. So in this way, Frost at midnight is a typical representative major romantic poem by the poem is an evaluation of the three significant themes of the poetry of Coleridge: the effect of nature on the imagination, the relationship between childhood and the natural world, and the relationship between the grown-up adult and innocence. In a child, the man of natural goodness is one of the fundamentals of romanticism, and Coleridge is at his best in past at midnight in expounding this belief, in expounding those beliefs. So it is about the poem uh, Fast at Midnight, written by S.T. Coleridge. Tomorrow we are discussing some other topic. Okay, bye. See you.